Hi, everyone. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this Q&A with the film Honor. I hope everyone enjoyed the film as much as I did. Please remember to register your vote because this film is available for an audience award. So please rate it and the other films you watch when you're finished. I want to start off today by thanking our major film sponsors and our sponsor for this particular film, Maggie King. And I'm excited to have with us today the film's writer, director, lead actor, and I must say also singer, Lauren Knoll, producer Caitlin Coombe, and director of photography Matthew Tompkins. We really appreciate your taking the time to meet with us today for this Q&A. We're going to try to limit our conversation to about 10, 15 minutes. So with that said, Lauren, this first question is for you. In your director's statement, which you submitted with the film for the festival, you note that this screenplay is largely or loosely based around your experiences, fears, and questions while an undergraduate at Brigham Young University. Can you elaborate a bit on that for us?
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, I was raised Mormon or Latter-day Saint. I grew up in Northeast Tennessee, but for me, as a young woman, I was like a very devout and a believing and earnest member of the church at that time. I applied to 0 other universities. It would just BYU for me. That's the only place I wanted to go to. So when I started as a freshman, I was entering in that mindset, happy to be a part of that community. And it was during my time there, I was, dating guys and, being a generally speaking good Mormon girl for the first few years I was in school. But I started having some questions. I had some feelings for a close friend of mine. And it was my final year at BYU that I actually had my first girlfriend. And so it was while I was a student there that I even discovered this about myself. And during that final year, I guess a lot of people, if I can backtrack, a lot of people would say, well, why would you go to BYU? If you're gay, like you can go somewhere else where you don't have these rules. If you don't want to follow the honor code, why did you come here? Well, my answer to that is your college years are a time of discovery. Of course, you're going to find something out about yourself that probably you didn't know when you were 17 and started at school. So that was my experience. And basically, I found myself to be a senior at school, nearing graduation, while I was in danger of at any moment, should I be turned in or should information get into the wrong hands, that I could just lose all of the work I put in so far. Aside from my own, just identity and faith crisis of, learning that about myself. So.
And Caitlin and Matthew, why did you get involved with this film?
I think I came on first. I knew Lauren through my girlfriend, and I had produced in the past, and I was super intrigued by the story. It was Lauren's probably my closest friend who is Mormon. I don't know many Mormons, so I was just intrigued learning about everything that she went through at BYU and also what other students go through. And so that was really intriguing to me, and I really wanted to jump on, and that's how I ended up getting involved in Honor.
Mm-hmm. And Matthew?
For me, the year that came before us making the film, Lauren and I had become close friends. And I always pride myself on trying to associate with stories that need to be told and stories that, there's something enriching and worthwhile to tell. And the script just kind of jumped off the page to me of something that, this is something we have to make. Absolutely. This has to be made. So
okay.
It was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. So tell us, what was your goal in creating this film, Lauren? And did you accomplish that goal in your mind?
I think so, and we still are. For me, to be honest, I never heard a story from like a young gay woman's perspective or from a lesbian's perspective inside the church. There's even to think about gay men inside the church. You have, I don't know, some Angels in America, say, in terms of big scale. There's other stories, but I didn't find any stories that showed me my experience when I was at BYU. However, I knew so many girls that after the fact, upon talking to each other, we had gone through the same thing there. And so for me, I've already heard back from people I don't know, but who had this experience when they were at BYU, or maybe not at BYU, but from inside the church. And just to be able to, I guess, give a small community of people a story so that they can see their own experiences on the screen is already hands down just beyond rewarding. And then next level, I'm a first-time filmmaker. This was my first time writing and directing. I studied acting, and so for me, there was also just the feat of writing something and getting it produced, bringing people on board who can help me make it the best version possible. And that in and of itself has come with a giant sense of accomplishment and camaraderie among the crew. And yeah, it feels good.
Yeah. So it was, of course, your debut, as you just said, as a writer and director. You've been an actor. So what did you learn? What did you all learn during the process of creating this film? And how will that affect your future work in the film industry, you think? This is for all three of you.
I think the biggest challenge was trying to shoot in LA, but make it look like not LA. Lauren and I had a huge issue trying to replicate her bedroom when she was at BYU, which was a basement. And obviously in LA, you just don't find basements. So I think I think that especially pre-production, just location finding that, and like figuring out how to create a world that doesn't exist where you are, especially on a low budget, was a challenge. I think it definitely makes me second, I guess. I mean, it all paid off. We found the perfect spot, but it definitely was the first time I had worked on a film where we really needed to find a space that was very, very specific to the situation. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, just to echo, I mean, I learned everything. Before it was show up at your call time, sit in a chair, get your makeup on, and stand at this mark and say these lines that you learned. You know, now it's think of all of these things together. So for me, first and foremost, it was just hiring people who I trusted and believed in, and who could help me with that. Yeah, the bedroom. I mean, poor Caitlin, like sticking that out with me because I was so insistent on that. That's actually something that did happen to me. You know, most of the story is fictional, but I did live in a basement room in my off-campus apartment during my senior year that had stairs that led up to the door. That's how I didn't know that the door was open around the corner. That was just so specific and important. And that was really difficult to find in LA. But yeah, I guess it was just a matter of when the team comes together and is like willing to put in the work, you know, you really can do anything.
Mm-hmm. I found it interesting, your decision to frame the story about juxtaposing Lane's meeting with the honor code official and the intimate scenes with her friend, where you went back and forth, and when she was rubbing your shoulders in the honor code office versus when you were being embraced by your friend. So can you talk about your decision to frame the story that way from the outset?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just the most interesting way to tell the story, for the entire scene to sort of take place in this interview setting in the honor code office, but to juxtapose the kind of the invasive questioning and the treatment of what had actually happened with Lane's memory and sort of her sense of feeling around what had happened. But for me also, I think it came down to, in terms of a moment you brought up of her like rubbing her shoulders, is I really wanted to have a good faith effort at portraying this woman in her genuine and earnest, truly believing she's right and this is the right thing to do self. Because in my opinion, I don't think there's a villain in this film. That might be surprising to hear from others. As someone who grew up Mormon, and who knows good Mormon people who might, unbeknownst to themselves, push people away or cause trauma to young people's lives, I wanted to capture sort of the intention of that moment as well. And to me, pitting them against each other and showing them side by side was the best way to do it.
Mhm, I can understand that.
Yeah.
And what steps did you take to create the drama and infuse some tension into the film?
I think there was something really interesting from the beginning that, you know, I think there's a clear approach we could have taken with it of, here's our villain character. We need to make these moments feel dark and scary and ominous. And then here's the warm, fuzzy goodness that is the memory. Being tasked with not villainizing or victimizing anyone, we really kind of were specific in our language in kind of how the camera moved and how our light interacted with all the scenes, to build a lot of that drama. We needed to feel the tension in the room in kind of lock offs or more controlled moments, and then feel some of the natural fluidity that was happening in the basement in the memories.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it was such a collaborative process because Lauren and the actors, the whole team, everyone was in such a flow that it made it really easy for me to just kind of follow the action here. And this built this dynamic thing in the basement moments. And then in all of the office space, we were so often in positions that were rigid and tense that the whole language, it just kind of fell into place naturally.
Yeah, but you had to be very purposeful about where you had the cameras and the lighting and all that, and that fell to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Caitlin, talk about this issue from your point of view.
Yeah, the point where being on set was so interesting. I'd worked on several films before this, and the tension in the room when you're filming was so intense that I remember when you guys were doing it in the interview and the investigation, they went for so long. They did such long takes, and I watched Lauren's character do that like arc of emotion, and it was like exhausting to watch. And I thought that the room by the end of the day it was tense to be in there, not in a bad way at all, but it was just like we were living this moment over and over again. And I thought that as soon as I was in the room watching it, and I wasn't in the room the entire day watching those scenes go down, but I was like, this is it. If I can feel it right here, it's going to be so beautiful on camera. And then secondly, obviously, because you were cutting between these two scenes, there was a few obviously versions of edits that happened, and looking at how it's changed, picking where you want to cut and what lines you're going to cut and what silences you're going to emphasize. I think it just came together so beautifully at the end that it was just to me, the tension was just like spot on in regards to where we wanted it to be felt.
Yeah, because as a viewer, I clearly felt it. Were there other major challenges that you want to chat about?
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. We've almost blocked this out by now, I think, but we lost sound. We lost some of our audio like all together from the basement scene. There's actually we went into ADR initially upon learning this news and making a plan. And it was really challenging because of the cut. And I worked with my editor to find, you know what I mean? We went back to the raw footage, but we didn't have the audio from the camera because we were using the mini, right? And
That's right.
And so we had nothing to guide us. And I knew that I had varied the line slightly on each take. So it's like, well, which one was this? So, we studied frame by frame and did the best we could. And to the point that the naked eye, you would look at it and you couldn't really tell that the audio was off from the mouth, but and we went into a mix, and it still just didn't feel like it was in that moment. It still felt of a post-production moment. So we finally cut those frames all together and wrote some new dialogue, went back into the office, and played that dialogue, you know, as though you're still hearing it from the other room. This is early on in the film, but there were a handful of moments that we had, you know, that we had to recreate the sound in post-production with no sound files to guide us.
Wow. Other challenges, Caitlin or Matthew, you want to cite?
I remember the early morning before we went into the interview was obviously we needed to make sure that the room looked like the honor code office. So Lauren, thankfully, kind of had well, you'd never been in it, but you knew exactly what it would look like in the feel, and getting the furniture. And you don't see it too much in the film, but the desk that was in that room was very large and heavy. So making sure we got the right, basically, decor that felt authentic was definitely a challenge. And then getting it into the space early that morning was just more a production challenge, but it was pretty, once we got in, it was fine. And then surprisingly, we found people who wanted to buy it at the end of the day of the shoot. So they came and got rid of it. It was like wild the day of. I was just like selling it for dirt cheap, like someone come get this now. And it all worked out. But that was kind of like a funny hurdle that we had to come over when on that day specific. Yeah.
These are things that the average viewer is not going to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, yes. Did you want to say something else? I don't want to cut you off.
Sure. I was just going to piggyback on that briefly in terms of the decor. There was, even in the art that we could hang on the wall, we had to make sure in terms of like copyright issues, I couldn't use what was authentically the LDS like painting of Jesus. And the depiction of Jesus in the LDS church is not the same as what you can find in terms of just royalty-free images of Christ that you can print, you know, otherwise. So I commissioned a queer woman who was also of an LDS background to paint the picture of Christ that's in the background of the honor code office, because it was something that was familiar to her. It's different enough that we can use it, but you know what I mean? Just things.
Yes.
Like
These are touches to make it more authentic.
Yeah.
Again, that someone who's not in the church would not know that. So it's great to hear you say that. How long did it take you to make this film, pretty just in a nutshell? And then what other projects are each of you working on now?
I started writing Honor in, I want to say April or May of 2019. And we fundraised in October. We shot it in December. So we were in, you know, kind of pre-production for that entire spring through winter. And I was then in post. To be honest, fortunately, I got most of the work done with on site with our composer and our sound mixer and our editor before the pandemic hit, and we were all working virtually. But from that point, my editor and I were working virtually together, still fixing the sound issues, and then I don't know. I guess we were at a picture lock in, I want to say March or April of 2020.
Okay, so that's actually
about
relatively fast track.
Yeah.
You know, it seems to me. Yeah. So Caitlin and Matt, we'll start with you guys. What are you working on now? And again, we have about 3 minutes.
You go ahead, Matt.
For me, since the pandemic, narrative has slowed a little bit. I've been moving in the commercial space recently. I have a Michelob Ultra campaign coming up and a Budweiser. I found a niche in beverage recently. You know, every day just moving forward through the pandemic and kind of how our industry recovers, gearing up for more narrative and feature length work.
Yeah, it's absolutely just an incredible time for so many industries, but most notably film. Caitlin, are you experiencing the same thing?
Yeah, well, actually, weirdly, Honor was kind of like my last hurrah in the film world. I went to school for it, and I did a lot of it right out of school, and then I kind of, my interests and my passions shifted. So now I actually do project management, which is very similar to producing, just in a non-film world. So, I mean, most of my community is still in the film world, so I wouldn't be surprised if I was, you know, pull back into it at certain points in my life, but for now, that is kind of my last project.
Okay, well, great. And Lauren, how about you? And do you plan to stay in the director writer role, or you want to do all of those?
I do want to create more content. I'm actually writing a half-hour comedy pilot script right now. Very different than Honor. It's a sort of vampire comedy with a quirky little young queer girl as the protagonist, an out of place vampire, and I audition regularly.
Oh, great. Well, listen, I just want to thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you virtually. And thank you so much for offering really a great deal of insight into the making of this film and the experiences that you shared. Thank you again. And I also want to thank our major film sponsors, as well as our special sponsor for this film, Maggie King. And with that, audience, please do not forget to vote for Honor and other films. And I just want to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
And for you guys, I wish you all the best in your career. You're clearly bright and engaged, and let's just get this pandemic behind us so you guys can move on with more and more passion. So thanks again. It was a privilege to meet you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.